of Genesis, and how the number of years that the first generations lived were like 969 years. And I'm also thinking about how your brain is a reflection, or what you think is a reflection of your health. So I don't think it's a uniform thing. I think given the general age expectancy in today's world, perhaps the majority of people are using only 10% of their brain, but I don't think it's impossible to exceed that.
Right. That's a good thought. You don't think you can exceed that. I'm gonna pause and pull on that, but at the same time, I see the pathway, like the thinking that you're going on in terms of that. It's still from a place of considering that we're limited to 10%. So I want to hear from everyone else. Do you, and this is like a free up question, just want to hear what your thoughts are before we actually jump into today's build, right? And for just so that you know, we are live and alive on Facebook and also YouTube as well. So, if you want to switch over and just interface with the video as well as the sound, we in two places. All right, Master Manuela, if you wanted to jump in and share what your thoughts are, do you think we all just, are limited to that 10% of our brain? What are you thinking?
Peace, everyone. Peace, Akio. I don't like general statements like that. We want to use 10%, and it's very broad, because which 10% are you even talking about? Do we utilize the same faculties and the same proportions? So even with we only use 10% of our brain, it gets kind of tricky when you put this type of ceiling up, because okay, which 10% am I using my intellectual reasoning? Am I good with languages? Am I good with spatial intelligence? Am I quick or am I accurate? Do I take longer to respond because the sentence responsible for speech are, they might be a little malformed, or they might be overly developed. Like, which parts of my brain are you talking about? And it just sounds suspiciously, it sounds sussy. Like I can't look around and say, it sounds sussy. Like, why would you say that? Who said that? When did they say that? And is there like a death sentence for everyone who comes after they said that? Were the people who came before them like at an advantage because they didn't know they could only use 10%, so they might have gone overboard and use like 12 or 11? It's sussy to me. I don't like that statement, or any type of general statement like that about humans, because like we don't know all humans. Is that even with different ethnic groups and people who engage in different types of lifestyle, people who may live a more rural lifestyle use different parts of their brain than people who live in the city, or people who work at 9 to 5. You would have to use their brains at a different level than people who may be entrepreneurs or who run businesses, or even monks. There's such a variety of people and forms of life on the planet. It's hard to believe that you could just cage everyone's cognitive potential with one statement. So I don't like that statement. I can't say how much we use, right. But it just seems sussy to me.
Right. And I'm glad you caught it, because the truth is, we hear that statement made all the time. Unmute right now and say, give me a year if you have heard that statement before. I actually was in a space where I believed it all the time, and that's dangerous. Belief is dangerous. So yeah, I was trotting on a path of dangerous decisions about the brain and just how I think about the brain. And you realizing and recognizing that it's suspect is indeed, that's discernment right there. For those of you jumping in, I want to greet a few of you before we continue. I see we have Yakira Eden and Mark and Darian. Welcome, welcome. Come on up to the stage and share your thoughts, share what you're thinking, share your opinion. That is fine. Ask questions. That's what we're here to build. So I do see Yafe. Yafe is joining us on YouTube as well. And so she says, yes, and who were they studying when that statement was crafted? Like, what group is the basis for that, right? And this is true. That's a great point. Who were they studying? That's always the most important thing when we talk about research, or we hear, oh, this percent of the body does this. Well, based on whose standard, right? And why? So many of us will always think that, or have thought at some point, that we only use 10% of our brain. The truth is that's based on old study, old research, and we're not going to get into so much who the research was done on, but how you can change the way we think and speak about our own body functions just based on putting out false research, right? So at one point, the study of the brain was really just focused on neurons as the functional part of our brain, right? Like the functioning cells of our brain, because they were trying to figure out, like, what are these cells? What are they doing? Like, if they could ever figure out the fullness of it, right? And I'm talking about scientists, biologists, and researchers. And in doing so, they identified that, we have this brain, this 10% of it is neurons, right? And the other 90% they identified as glial cells, right? So one of the things that I thought was interesting is they just labeled the 90% that was not considered neurons as supportive tissue. So that's where the idea of you're only using 10% of your brain actually comes from. It comes from that piece of research that I divided the contents on the makeup of our brain into two sections. One that was just like supportive, they're just there to feed and support the neurons. And the neurons are the actual ones firing and doing all of the crossing of communication across synapses. So we're just gonna focus on the 10%, which is what is identified as functioning. And this is where the idea of you're only using 10% of your brain was born. That's where it actually comes from. And, as I'm thinking about that and sharing, that I think it's really important to consider, again, how we take these broad statements, as even Master Menelik shared, and they become imprinted on our brain, and that becomes, those things create cages or boundaries for us, right? And so I think it's really important to consider then how purpose, this is why today's affirmative is actually titled, Are You Hardwired for Purpose? Because purpose goes beyond the brain, right? Purpose goes beyond someone's research. And if we're moving and functioning off of purpose, it does not matter what that research says, nor does it even matter sometimes the patterns that we find ourselves in today, because those patterns are only their cages, right? And they do not necessarily allow for us to expand beyond in order to fulfill the purpose that we have been given and hardwired for. Right? So that's what I wanted to share, just in terms of like how the brain functions. And again, I'll say I was blown away by the way a little bit of research over a period of time just took over, and you take 90% of physical matter that you see in the brain and you just kind of say, okay, it's a passive thing. It does not function or have a function that is as valuable as neurons. But the truth is, I'll share, what was considered the non-functioning part of the brain, that 90%, it is actually responsible for regulating the way neurons fire, how they communicate, right? The swiftness or the pace with which they communicate, which speaks to some of the points you made, Massimane, like about the way our brains function and what affects how it functions. All right. Anyone else? Is there anyone else who probably knew that was actually a false alarm and not true?
Yeah. I was never buying that. Have you seen Limitless?
Pardon?
Have you seen Limitless? That movie with Scarlett Johansson.
I have seen Limitless.
Yeah, it reminds me of that movie, and I would say well, that classification could depend on one type of person, or even it reminds me of dark matter. Like when they said dark matter was just inactive, and only recently they're finding out new information, which isn't really new. It's ancient information. So it's kind of related to what you said about how the scientists are finding it out, but who are the scientists who are saying this? Like, what council came together and said 10% of your brain, we only use 10% of your brain, and maybe they only use 10% of their brain. So, yeah.
Ouch.
And also distractions. Distractions have a lot to do with how much percentage of your brain we use.
Right. Yeah. So it directly connects to, again, the functioning of the glial cells and how those help to support the neurons. And so now with that, we understand, hey, you know what? We actually have access to the 100% of our brain, right? That was, that blew my mind in a sense, because it's like, well, wait, all this time you have humans, people taking on these limiting beliefs, which is interesting because it went back to, for those of you who are listening and are, you follow Anu. So some of our discussions actually take place on Friday when we do our in-house study group and so on. And, one of the things that I think came up many times was, these sayings that we all say, but they're especially those that are rooted in biblical, like biblical phrases or biblical ideas, but many times they're wrong and they're inaccurate and they were created by somebody, right? And I really think it's important to know who was that somebody, and why would you create these ideas and create paradigms of thinking and impose it on people, and then you go about your merry way, you hear it, you repeat it, you hear it, you repeat it, and you never ask why. Where did it come from? And this is one of those. I see Kira Eden had jumped into this on stage. Want to join in the conversation?
Sure, please. I really appreciate the, what did you call it, a false alarm, that reminder to really consider what's being put in front of us. And even what was said about limiting beliefs, it's only when you recognize that there is a limitation being placed, can you even appreciate that, oh wait, no, this is limiting my potential. So it's like there's a recognition in just that statement alone, or an expectation of recognition that many of us may have only recently come to appreciate, to look beyond, well, this is the color blue and this is all you can do. These are your only options.
Right.
And having a broader perspective, or being a part of a community that encourages and cultivates exploring beyond these bounds to really come to a realization that we're boundless, right? And in being boundless, of course I can access more than 10% of my brain. Of course I can encourage my youth to explore beyond, what may be identified as what they should or can or could do. There's just so much that goes into that one little fact that you shared. And then, working or previously working in an environment of psychiatry where there's so much research that happens and there's so many studies that are inflicted, I'll say, on the mentally ill to kind of test theories. What I've learned in that environment is that how you pull together your case study is really based on what it is you want to support or disprove. No matter how much you may try to factor, or rule out bias, the question oftentimes is the bias. So there's just so much to it. I really, really appreciate this topic. And if there's something that I would, encourage us to just walk with, is the ownership of being boundless. And that, there is that potential to go beyond. I think it was last strong where Aki El-Karar spoke about the migration. And it's like how many of us knew that it was time to move on from where we were, whether it was a state of mind, whether it was, I do remember Sister Iris McCabe speaking about, shifting where she lived and shifting where she worked. But for so many of us, it may start with shifting the way we think or even our self-perception, but we don't, because we're bound to what others have kind of identified as our limits. So, yeah, good thanks for the topic.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, I mean,
What you said just now, Yakira made me think of, I think there's like a phenomenon with elephants, with circus elephants. It's similar for other animals too. But like the conditioning that they go through as they grow up, they tie them to certain chains or certain, like a rope. And as they're growing up, they realize that this rope is something that they can't get away from. They struggle against it when they're too weak to break it. But as they grow up, they just accept that as long as this leash is on me, or as long as this tether is on me, then I can't break free from it. And they don't necessarily reassess themselves to say, I'm actually large enough to not only break this rope, this flimsy piece of string that's holding my leg,
right.
but I'm also strong enough to break the beam that it's tied to. But I'm so used to not being able to break it, and I've already accepted that. So just hearing that, like, I already, quote unquote, know that it's true. So it's very dangerous when you accept something, at a certain age, but you don't take time to like re-examine it, re-examine how it may be limiting other thought processes as well. So I think that was a good example that you brought up, Sister Maria, for this phenomenon of hearing something, accepting it as factual, but never taking the time to examine it. Now you can ask a question like, okay, well, what else haven't I examined that may be limiting me?
Sure.
It really has no power other than the power that I give it,
Right.
and it may actually be limiting me from moving forward. Like you said in your email, Yakira, even like, how do I know when it's time to move on? I may have been able to move to the next step, but I'm so stuck in a mentality of, well, this is all I can do right now, that I never really reassess my situation or take stock or do just have some situational awareness to realize I've leveled up like a couple of levels since I got here, and I can move on from this space. But I keep telling myself that I can't, or this is where I'm stuck, then I won't move on. There's a movie, Undisputed, right? It's like a prison fight movie. And there was this character, Yuri Boyko, and he was like the champion of prison fighting. And in the previous part, this is part 3, in the previous movie, his leg was broken, like at the knee. and he couldn't fight and move as well as he used to. So now he's depressed. He's like basically like the janitor for the prison now. He doesn't really, he keeps his head down, he let his hair grow out. He basically cleans up. And the person who used to be like his manager, he was like an underworld boss named Gaga. And he was like, I could still, you could still fight. You could still be on top. And he was like, is this acceptable to you? And Boyko was like, this is where I am. And saying that I've accepted my place here. And so many of us accept our place when we're really working in spaces or moving through spaces that are beneath our level of growth. Like it's time for us to move forward so that we can have something that challenges us at the level that we're at. But we're so used to the limit that we placed on ourselves, or the limits that we believed about ourselves, that we don't move forward. So I thought the point about our conditioning, how we condition ourselves even, it was very important. So good, thanks for that.
Right. So powerful points, and you all you're really zooming in on the idea behind sharing that piece of factual information and tying it to being hardwired, because the next shift is, okay, yes, we have access, that's the language, access to 100% of our brain, right? And I'm saying brain, but we all know, I want to reiterate that purpose goes beyond this physical brain function, right? Our purpose is, leans and is founded in righteousness and character. There's also a part of us that is the unseen that drives us to function in purpose, right? And to have an embedded purpose. But I will say, but because the limitations that we place on ourselves is what it keeps us stuck in patterns, right? There's some of that that's addressed in Chief U.S. Mind Heart Words, and I think it's really important to think about how that stuckness or being stuck in patterns or habits causes the same brain that was saying we have the 100% potential and capacity to expand and grow and build and do and level up. That same brain just gets stuck in the same neurons firing across the same pathway, doing the same thing. And so in reality, we become the limitation, because there are some limiting beliefs, but at times, even the habits and behaviors that we choose consistently becomes the cage that we create for ourselves. And today's build is really to help affirm that you are hardwired for purpose. And when you think about purpose, it goes way beyond where we're functioning now. It goes way beyond the functioning of your physical brain. It means that you're leaning on other aspects of the self to propel forward. All right, I wanted to pause and just greet Mr. Tu and Mark, but I also want to greet Darian and Matthew. Welcome to the stage. You may unmute your mics and share.
Peace. I wanted to jump back in. I'll go to Maria. I'm seeing a theme being formed here. Master Menelik's, initial example was one of a caged or shackled animal, and then he gave the analogy from the prison movie. You also just spoke about, the cages that we exist within or use to limit ourselves. And as I'm listening, I'm like, there is that piece that is self, right? Self-limiting beliefs. But then I'm just like, well, then who's the liberator? Is it community? Is it, is it a higher power? Like, what is it? And when I think about the times where we take those hard lefts, or we shift and make an about face, oftentimes it's will say, girl, you know what you're doing? Because we got it good here. Like, look at where you are. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And it's like, you can listen to that or recognize that, you know what? That's not the voice of my people. Like, that isn't the voice of that which is propelling me forward or even supporting me.
Right.
And oftentimes, that voice isn't an internal one. That's the external that we allow to kind of keep us locked in or to create a boundary around us. So while we may be that calf that, or not maybe a cow at this point, right, based on the example, we may realize, like, I'm pushing against this fence, and I'm like, it's shaky. Like, I think I can take it. You know, it's my peers at that time who are not my ALItes that may say, no, but you don't know what's outside of that fence. Like, we've seen cars, we've seen animals get hit down, but your calculations has made it clear that you can be the one to knock this boundary down and do something beyond these limits. And so I just want to circle it back to the value of community and, you know, how important it is to be in a space where you're not the biggest mind or the greatest thinker, but even what you bring to the table, even when it is good, is questioned. So that when you present something and then another sister says, are you sure? Well, what is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, I'm sure. And this is what it is. And then it's like, okay, yeah, I agree. But it's not a tacit agreement. It's an agreement with a degree of accountability to see how firmly rooted you are and what you're bringing forward. So again, it's just really important that we examine our environment and those that we allow around us, because those people can become your jailers, if you will. Right. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. You know, so powerful, because hardwiring is literally, it's like a standard, and somebody else could be creating that standard for you. And if someone else is creating that standard for you, then you know, this directly connects to being a being that's a cage in itself, because one of our Wednesday bills or private study sessions, we're building on the idea of the golem. So the truth is, are you in a, you know, sort of like, or can you be compared to a golem or we or whomever that's functioning from a place where someone else is now writing your purpose across your forehead or on a piece of parchment and sticking it in your mouth and saying, okay, this is what you're going to do, you know? So I really like that you brought in community, because I was about to say, okay, mic drop, done. Because toward the end, I actually have an affirmation that I wanted to share, and it is about community, because that there's so much about our purpose and our functioning that's tied up and wrapped up in community. And it is not, you know, there's a piece in the 14 Keys where, you know, the chief kind of speaks about the idea of purpose, but also from a place of vision, saying, you know, like, if we have jegnas within a certain community, whether it's conscious community or not, whether it exists for real or not, and they're functioning in order to create a nation or organization, they're only functioning based on what they're seeing in front of them in the now. They will never endeavor to move beyond where they are. It won't happen, because all you're functioning off of is what you see in the reality, but the visual that you're identifying as reality. But when we consider strong and powerful attributes such as faith, right, then that helps to propel, and community, that helps us to propel beyond what we see, so we can actually live out the promise or the vision, you know. So what we do is not just based on where we are right now, as you said, Master Mena, like, you know, you're just good, you're here, and you feel that that's okay. or the patterns and pathways that we've identified with for so long. It's like, I'm good. I'm gonna stay right here. There has to be a pushing beyond. And many times that community is what helps to push us beyond, way beyond. Thank you. I wanted to hear from the Matthew and Darian. You're on stage, so if you want to unmute and share, this is the time.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Greetings, you can be heard.
Hello, how are you doing? So I don't mess your name up. How do you say your name?
I am Morea.
Marie.
Morea. Yeah.
Maria. Okay.
Morea. Morea, like in raise. Okay.
Maria.
More.
This app is crazy. It's crazy for me right now. Excuse me. It's like this.
Okay.
Slight stutter with it.
All right. Well, you can pause, and when you get it, a handle on it, you can come forward. Okay. Master Benedek, you were Darian.
Go ahead, Master Miller. Hello, can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, give thanks. Peace. Thankful for this bill because this is something that before going through the initiation process, I had these crazy imprints on my mind where, I can only do this. I can only do that. I need to do this. And one of, our qualities is being unafraid to do something. We build through this in order to be unafraid. And it makes me think about electricity. My brain is always with that because, I do that every day. In regards to the brain, people being only able to use 10% of their brain. And I remember hearing that. I can't remember where I heard it either, which is another issue that limits people more, is because we hear these things and we take them in and we're like, we don't even know where it came from. And in regards to how much we use the brain, I was thinking about wiring, right? The more you develop or the more power you need, the wire size increases, right? Because I think about, I believe Chief did a segment on SU and the brain and how exercise and expansion and learning new things causes a connection to expand. So as we grow and we take on new things, the capacity in which we need to use our brains expands. Going back to what Master Menelik said, this person, a photographer, may need to use his brain this way. A carpenter may need to use their brain this way. And your brain, based on the connection to mind and how much you develop your mind, will increase the capacity in which you use the brain. And it also brings you back to one of the command of the days where Chief was talking about, he gave an example of, like, say we're this multi-armed being, right? And we're forcing ourselves to go down one pathway, and we're trying to fit all of our arms into this one pathway, when in reality we may need to expand outside of that and use our arms in multiple different ways, And I think about that, like, say if you had 6 hands and you were trying to fit all 6 hands in one glove, that limiting that's why it's so terrible. So I give thanks to the bill. I don't want to keep rambling on.
No, man, you're good, Brother Darian. And you brought it home too with the more concrete example of wiring. So give thanks for that. What you said about trying to fit all of those hands into one glove, it made me think also the level of tension that people move with when they're not working or walking in their purpose. You may be in a situation where you may not actually be performing what it is that you were built or wired to do, and you try to rewire yourself for something. You know, even thinking about how many of us had like multiple jobs, you know, or multiple places of employment, not because we were building towards, you know, our purpose. It's not like I want to be a master carpenter, so I may have worked at different construction companies, or I may have worked for an antique shop, or I may have worked with people who build log cabins. Like all of that is still within the vein of being a carpenter, right? And you're eventually working towards being able to sustain yourself. You know, like in the other way we speak of 7 years, you know, being an apprentice for 7 years and then eventually bouncing out and becoming an entrepreneur. But if you're doing like multiple things that are, they seem to be unrelated, or they're not really building towards a singular goal, then it can get frustrating, or it can get, you can get kind of limited in your thought patterns of what it is that you can do, or what your potential actually is. Because you may be a dishwasher one day, and then you work at a grocery store the next day, you work at a gas station the next day. Like you keep accepting what you think is available to you at whatever level you think you may be at. You know, you may only have an entry level mindset, and in reality, you're wired to be a master, or you're wired to be an executive. You may not necessarily function at that level. Or actually, Zach brings up this point often of if you educate a fish, if you give a fish an education on how to climb a tree, he'll spend his whole life thinking it's stupid.
Yes.
You know, I'm paraphrasing. You know, I probably butchered that one, but it's true. Like if you educate someone for something that they're not wired to do, then they're going to put those limits on themselves, because like something must be wrong with me. You know, everyone is able to do this thing. Why can't I? Or why am I so different than everyone else? You may be in the wrong space. You know, you may have been the one who's supposed to branch out from where your family is and do something greater, or something, you know, that blaze your own trail. And it's hard to see that when you're in a society that seeks to shackle you into one space. You know, like, he's not here, so I have to bring it up. But like the Matrix, right? Everyone was basically, humans were only useful for one purpose to the machines. Like these are batteries, you know, but in their brains are hardwired to do stuff. So I have to create a simulation that makes them think that they're living up their purpose, but in reality, they are actually, they're just batteries. So whether you're living up to purpose or not doesn't matter to me, as long as you're connected to my grid. And I know that you're powering my system, you know, as opposed to maybe building and powering your own system and branching off into something that's a lot more powerful. You know, but you won't do that if you don't think you can. You won't do that if you limit yourself.
Right.
You know, Masterman, I like you. Yeah, thank you for that. As I'm listening to you, you know, like shift into the idea of purpose and, you know, the fish kind of existing and thinking that, well, maybe I don't have a purpose because I can't do this one thing that you may be trying to orient me towards. There's also the idea that we're multi-talented, and if the uni-purpose is being and experiencing this plane to the fullness of my potential, then would that mean that I just need to be an executive, or I just need to be a carpenter? And I think a perfect example of that, and I know our sister Okoti Yamina is pulling together the an artistry initiative, right? Just to kind of share how multi-talented the members of ANU are, you know, and there are things like crochet and jewelry making and, you know, and artistry like yourself who draws and sketches. But then there are those I guess I have to own it. Like myself, who I'm like, hey, I didn't do nothing, right? Like in that realm.
She got an album coming out, yo. Yeah.
I was gonna get to that. It's so funny because I'm like, in my mind, like, I don't do those things. Like I do this. I like to read books. I like to talk, and I can connect concepts. But that's not true because yes, I do. After encouragement, I do write poetry. It's like, oh yeah, and I did create some art with the youth, and oh yeah, I have been playing the cello for a year and can do something. And so it's like, because there has been a space and opportunity to cultivate and explore different facets of myself, you can you can reclaim those unfamiliar parts. And it may even sustain or support the imbalance that you felt before. It's like, if I'm only doing this one thing, if I'm, as you mentioned, like if I'm only focused on thinking I can be that entry level worker, but I'm so frustrated and nothing about this is fulfilling. Fine, maybe that's what you're doing for now because that's where the opportunity is to gain $1. But how are you cultivating those other pieces of yourself that are more fulfilling and that are more satisfying? Whether it be, which I have done, whether it be sitting in the park and just playing your cello, or sitting in the park and just sketching, where there's no pressure. Those people don't know you. You don't ever have to go back to that park again. If you screech it up and hurt some children's ears, so be it. But at least you're doing something and you're expanding you. You're not just doing it in the basement, or you're not just writing about the plan that you have for the 7th year and not actually taking a step to actualize that plan. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. I've been doing like live sketching live, and it felt weird because I hadn't drawn in a while. And I was like, I'm gonna mess this up. But that's the thought that kind of limits you. I'm gonna mess this up. Well, so what? You've expanded. You did something that you weren't doing before. And with anything, like, you do it enough, you are gonna get good at it. But if you always think, I'm gonna mess this up, or I'm only gonna do it if I know I'll succeed, then you will always have that thought in the back of your mind, I'm gonna mess this up. As opposed to trying and feeling a little bit less, and then getting more competent and confident. Chief did a segment a couple of years ago, self-esteem versus self-efficacy, right? And your self-esteem being how you feel about yourself,
Right.
Based on emotion, as opposed to self-efficacy, which is how you feel about yourself based on like your past experience, or based on what you've already done. You've done trial and error, and you felt it out. Like, you don't even fear failure no more. That actually adds to the fun, and it makes people more comfortable with you because you're not like this robot. You're someone who can mess up and laugh it off and still give a great performance, because to you it's not like I'm performing, I'm doing my thing, and people just happen to be in the room.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I had to bomb a few times DJing for me to, you have to get over yourself. So that's what came to mind when you're speaking, Esther. But I do have a question. So from what everyone shared, does culture determine one's achievement of purpose?
I do think that culture has there are parts to achieving purpose that will include community, right? And you say culture, and I went directly to community, because if you're talking about the way we do things and how we function and what are edicts and how do we carry ourselves, what are our laws, and how do we function in terms of engaging with people, what are our laws around finances and family, and there's a we there that we can't escape. You know, when you talk about culture, you're talking about a we, and I think that brings back community into the conversation. You know, I saw Yakira and Menelek unmuting, so I'll let it flow.
Peace, yeah. I'm right with you, Coach Maria. My knee-jerk response was absolutely cultural imperative sets the framework for one's purpose, for the cultivation and expansion and exploring of one's purpose. But what is that purpose connected to? It is connected to community. So if we are all aligned with the same cultural imperative, and if we, for the most part, those of us speaking, we are Anu. And so if the cultural imperative of Anu is family, then the examples that Coach Maria rattled off just so easily and readily was just that: family, economy, stewardship, patriarchy. These are the tenets that we begin to form ourselves around and align our purpose with. And I think a really cool example of that is knowing that we can go on a retreat, and my 9-year-old, who has myself and his older sister in the home, but then gets to a retreat and is among 15 to 20 brothers who he's just like, okay, that's where I belong. Like, I belong over there with the men, and
right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say hi when I see you, but I'm over there. And then comes home and wants to play chess even more, and wants to go online to practice because he knows he's got Master Menelek who's going to be playing chess with him, because that's important, right? And he's able to challenge a different piece of his brain. And honestly, it's a piece that Ema is like, I don't know if I know chess. So yes, I'm glad, I'm grateful for that cultural imperative of family, because it allows my son to explore more of what purpose may be for himself, and being all of the components of a young man. So that's my long answer.
I definitely have to agree with what the sisters just said. That exploration is very important, because, again, your culture may be the limiting factor, and even what you consider within range for what you should be able to do. Like, you may hear statements like, oh, chess is for nerds, chess is for generals. That's how people decide who's going to win and who's going to lose the territory that you want to put your Christmas lights up on. Who got that for you? The generals. How did they do it? They were strategizing. So even the way you perceive the things that are done in life, like certain forms of music, like that's white people music. That music, it more than likely came from people who look like you, but sometimes things are co-opted, and because we, like Chief often says, we're not a people of memory, we forget some of the things that we even invented, and we allow people to make such statements as, oh, you speak so well. It's like, yo, I was speaking when y'all was in kids growling at each other. So I don't know what you're talking about. You speak so well. You kind of do. But yeah, there's certain things that culturally we don't really encourage, because we don't think it's for us. Based on the limiting culture that we've accepted about ourselves. We're not smart. We shouldn't speak properly. We shouldn't dress a certain way. We shouldn't be interested in certain forms of information, like legal information or tax information or economic information that I'm learning every day just being around other people. Because I was more like, all right, if it's green paper and it can buy me, I don't know, Snickers, then I'm good. I used to be on that tip. Or baby root. That was my thing. I used to like baby root. But if it was like that, then yeah, I can spend it and it gets me stuff. Until you get into a space like this around people who deal with economic information, and it's like, nah, you can actually leverage the money that you have to make more, or you can even leverage the status of how you report your income to leverage it and make more, or be able to make certain financial moves. And I'm like, hacks. Oh, y'all got all the hacks. Y'all know what's going on. So yeah, your culture can influence the way you perceive your capacity for even having a purpose. Some people don't think their purpose is that much, or that it can take them that far, because there's a glass ceiling that we perceive to be above us, and we just stop pushing upward, or we stop that elevation or the upward movement. Like the Elijah Muhammad quote, that honorable Elijah Muhammad quote that Chief was giving us, you can't beat your culture, or the culture of the environment that you're in. You're not going to beat it, not by yourself. So you have to adopt a culture, or culture is going to be provided for you. I think solutions for dysfunctional family relationships helps to really bring that home with the characters, that are portrayed in that text, and what they perceive to be possible, and some of the questionable choices they made based on that perception of what's possible, because that also affects how we go about achieving our purpose. I might think the only way to achieve my purpose is to sell drugs. That's the only way to make money here. So yeah, I love to sell drugs, and as long as I don't go to jail, and I can bypass that karmic rebound, then I should be okay. But I don't see any other way to make it past this perceived glass ceiling, other than doing something that could potentially find me up in a space where I'm even less likely to achieve what I've set out to do. Or it may take me a different path that may take longer. I may take a decade or 2-decade long, or quarter of a century long detour to achieving my purpose, as opposed to doing what's there for me. Which is why being able to connect to your source is so important. But again, if those limits are there, you're not going to really see the potential, and that can trip you up like big time.
Yeah, to the extent kind of reminds me of what Kuti Maria started the conversation with the brain, because it's like neuroplasticity. Like when you have an injury, and now your nerves have to relearn different things, and actually they grow more branches after the injury, because you're learning new things. So that's why I look at culture, like even choosing a culture increases that plasticity, or that those branches that can that form in your brain. So big things.
Yeah, and so there are a couple of points that you all brought up. I'll start with your Kirian. I think that's furthest back, because you mentioned community, and you gave an example of your 9-year-old being in space with other brothers, and just like falling in alignment and knowing, this is the drum beat that I need to kind of bounce off of. And putting in my own words, sorry. But that I think it's so crucial, because that's why there are huge indigenous, many indigenous communities who focus on identify, like they're using when a young person comes forward, a youth comes forward, many of the elders in the community use forms of divination at birth to help the community identify what the attributes and strengths of the child are. What are they coming into the world with? Because the truth is, the attributes and strengths that they're coming in to the world with is directly connected to the needs of the community. So there's this seamless necessity for community, when it comes to purpose, when it comes to purpose deferred, and purpose deferred will, kind of, that's one of the subsections of today's conversation, because I wanted to introduce, well, what about purpose deferred? And Massamani, like you pointed it out, kind of like when you were talking about some of the reservations we may have when it comes to sharing or exposing the art or the things that we do. Those fears, those what ifs, can really take a toll on what it is that we need to be doing and what it is that we've been hardwired to do. But at times we kind of trip up the wire and we decide, okay, I'm just going to stay on this path because it's most comfortable, right? But fear only lives in our thoughts. So those what ifs, and they cloud our perception of the reality, and I think it's really critical as we're talking about the brain to even say too, like, there is a reality versus dream state, right? So if the brain in many ways cannot identify an experience that is reality or experience of reality versus an experience in the dream state, then it's really crucial and critical for us to be able to lean on and have a community, because that community constantly drives you toward deciphering the truth, and they're going to be a mirror in a sense to kind of help guide, so, and eliminate the what ifs, eliminate the fears, and if there's fear, then it means that we're not living in the moment as well too. So there's so many things you all shared so much, and if I were to comment on each one of the shares, it will feel scattered because there was so much in what you were sharing, and I was making connections as you were going along. But I think again, back to the point that you made, Yakira Ian, it really helps to underscore how crucial community is in fulfilling purpose, because all of the experiences, the sum total of the community, the brothers who are there to support and build, even the idea of playing chess, support and build that skill within your youth, that's necessary, right? It's probably part of his purpose that we may not even know about, or maybe we would know if we were in a position where we were doing certain traditional rituals. I'm not talking about candles and incense. For those who hear ritual and your mind immediately goes to a certain place, because a ritual can be a consecrated thing, so it does not have to be. I light candles and incense and I say some magical words. These are traditions. So yeah, your sister Yamina, you open up a big pathway in terms of tying purpose to culture and community. And there, there's no way we could walk away from this conversation today and say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to be in my space alone. That's just going to be me. I can do it by myself, kind of thing. Because the reality is purpose, righteous purpose. This is in the 14. There's a piece in the 14 keys that speaks about this. Like, your righteous purpose is fulfilled in community. So there's just so much, and it's tied to character, and it's tied to doing what is right and what is to your benefit. And the idea of what is your benefit is directly tied to what is the benefit of your community, because there's a false sense of me, that we have to also identify here. I'm just going to pause because I can't even see if anyone was trying to jump in. We have a lot who are not on stage, but you're listening in the essence of reciprocity. If you are listening and something piques your interest or pricks you and you want to jump on stage and share, please feel free to do so. Any other thoughts?
Sure. I was thinking, as you were speaking about, all of the beautiful points that we shared during this conversation, and even back to Yakira Eden's point with her 9-year-old, he didn't we didn't force him to do nothing. We didn't sit him down your blood stop, you learn to play chess. It wasn't nothing like that. It was just, y'all playing chess, I'm playing chess. Y'all playing kickball, I'm playing kickball. This is what the brother's doing, alright, this is what I'm doing. And he really soaked up everything that was going on around him. But he saw so much potential of what he could be around him. He saw so many different intelligences around him, which is why it's very important for us to not move with that I might mess up. Because at the end of the day, who cares? It's not just for you. Sure, it helps you to learn and to grow and to cultivate yourself. But what's the use if you're going to hide yourself? The scripture that speaks about just hiding a light under a bushel. You're not going to turn on the light and then hide it. Imagine how annoying that would be. It's completely dark. One person has a phone with battery. They turn on the flashlight and then they put their finger over the flashlight. See. You know what I mean? So that's the purpose of that flashlight. It's dark. There's no electricity.
Right.
But we need light. So we shine the light. And we are in a space where there's very little light that comes from truth. You have a lot of people who are saying, come over here, or come over here. It's like the red light district with all those neon signs. It's like, no, you can see in here, come on. So it's like that. You don't necessarily have to be the world's greatest to show what it is that you have. And that's one of the things that keeps us rigid, not necessarily thinking that we got it or not thinking that we're ready. Well, you're not going to be ready if you stay in practice. You have to actually perform. That'll let you know how ready you are. You might be like, that's actually a piece of the cake. And that might spark you and send you on a journey like, how much can I develop this thing? I thought I couldn't do it, but then I got around people who actually did it. And not only did I realize that no matter how high of a level they're at, they still get nervous, or they still study, or they still practice. Right. But I'm actually closer to their level than I thought I was. I think, was it Drake? Yeah, Drake. The singer, he was like, or the musician, the musical artist, whatever category he was fit in. He was saying that he went to an acting class, and Denzel Washington was there. And he was like, what's he doing taking acting lessons? But no matter what level you're at, you're still a student. And I think if you keep that level of humility, it makes the journey a lot more fun than thinking, well, I've been doing this for such and such a time, so I should have it. I should be perfect. I shouldn't be asking questions, or I shouldn't be revisiting my basics because I should have it. That word should, like I said before, is very dangerous, because it limits your willingness to explore, because you think you should be going this way, or I should have it, or I should know this, so I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to deliberate. I'm just going to assume that everyone believes in facts that I believe in, and if someone questions it, then I'm going to get on them. And if everything works the way I think it should, then everyone else is going to get on them, because that's not the singular answer to this situation. So it sort of that being wired that way sort of takes you away from your purpose as well.
Yeah, so powerful. When you think about and when you share what you are sharing, it is we have to think about it. Like, what is the function of you being here on this planet, right? Submitted to a larger plan, right? Like, what is the function of me like all of us having or taking on a human form when we are tethered to a perfected form, right? A heavenly form. That heavenly form is in such a perfect state, it can't even ask those questions. It can't even, it can't do anything to help to propel forward a purpose or even, try to imagine or envision what our questions are or what it means to even be here and function within that purpose. So, yeah, we're tethered to that heavenly perfected form of ourselves, but the reason we are on this plane is to actually live out and enact. And, when you say, sometimes you become crippled with fear or the what ifs, or also the I know, I've been there, I've done it. That can be crystallizing, and the sad story is if you're crystallizing, you're not even perfecting, right? You're not moving toward perfection. So what are you relating back up to your heavenly self? What are you doing to advance the purpose and the the mission that you've been given on this plane? Nothing. You can't do anything. Not if you're stuck and crystallized in that space. So, and it could be very debilitating if and when that happens. And in many cases, it happens in some of our lives that consistently, and in the mind as well too. I heard somebody on mute, so I apologize. I had to get that out.
Yes. Aside from doing all these things to find out your purpose, I think it's really amazing that we each are hardwired for something specific.
True.
And a lot of people don't know their purpose, and part of the a way to get closer to that is to be present, as we learned in our new. So in every moment, if you can just be in that moment fully and be present, I think, we learned, and I've learned that it brings you closer to figuring out that purpose.
Oh, I thought that was Raheem and Ramit coming off mute. Oh, okay. They're not on stage. Never mind. I thought they were on stage.
They're not on stage yet.
Greetings, everyone. Well, while we wait for them to come on stage, I just wanted to say that Semenya, you hit the trigger for me. As you were speaking about you'll never know unless you actually go in and do it. Mm-hmm. And it made me think of, I think it was you who made the comment a few shows ago about when members are talking online and doing things live, it make it look easy, and sure. We may be sitting there and it's we're nervous and there's butterflies all up in our stomachs, and it's something difficult. At the same time, I think there's this thread that runs through many where it's but if we don't do it, we'll never know how. You don't get good at it, right? And so then it brought me to that I don't think it's a quote, but it's a saying, you have to learn your craft. So then it's it goes into the knowledge and the wisdom. You have to learn and always be learning, especially if we're here to answer a question. That's where that knowledge is. You have to always be leveling up and learning your craft so that you can spring into action, whether you're nervous or not. I know I suffer from that all the time. And it's just and I may get up there and make a complete fool of myself, and there'll be crickets, but it's you won't learn about it and you won't figure out how to fix it unless you do it. Right. So give thanks. I just wanted to share that.
Oh, give thanks, sister. Yeah, I always had this internal joke ever since the Avengers came out, the first Avengers. And there's the scene where we do that Captain America, now may be a good time for you to get angry. And his response was, "That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry." And I sort of use the same analogy, but to do that, like, I was nervous. Like that's my sound. Like, I'm always nervous. So that's how I get through. Because I don't like talking to people. You know what I mean? But I realize that Chief sees things in you that you don't necessarily see, and he puts you in a position to bring it out. You know, so I definitely feel where you're going. Oh, hey, you were nice, Hill. I didn't even see you. Hey, peace, sister. Yeah, peace. How you doing?
How you doing?
I wanted to jump in and just, man, that whole nervous thing, or the whole, I think in my old profession, I guess I would often say it feels like I'm gonna fake it until I make it. And then you go into a room and you open your mouth and then it's like, wait, y'all buying this? Like, this makes sense? What? Really? Okay. And you realize it's not as fake as you think. Like, you may be bringing something forward that you don't recognize, but once you open your mouth or pick up that medium, whether it's paint or charcoal, pencil, whatever it is, or that instrument, and you start doing it, while you may not feel confident, others are edified through how you're bringing the Most High forward in that moment. And I guess the example that I thought of was what you touched on, Master Mena. Like, I listened to you said, well, yeah, me going live and doing those drawings, I just kept thinking, oh, I'm going to mess it up. And I thought to myself, I didn't say it at the time, but I thought, well, how would we know? How would we know that it's messed up if it's your art, if it's your craft? And I'll tell you, I know that first live that you did, it went for quite a long time. It went past my son's bedtime. But he watched the entire thing. We were on a walk, he was watching. We came back in, he was eating dinner. We were watching. And he wouldn't have noticed he messed up. Nor would anyone who's looking at it to experience something. So it's like we have our own self-defeating might even be the word, like narrative in our heads that'll keep us limited,
Right.
Or keep us nervous about doing a thing. But the power in pushing past that is that by pushing past that, we're more on purpose. Because, like I remember Chief saying, your gifts are the things that are most attacked. And so I just always remember being told, oh, you talk like a white girl. Oh, you talk like why do you speak like that? I mean, but I was young. I'm like, well, what do you mean? You're my neighbor. We both living in Brooklyn. Like, we both here together. I don't speak any different than you speak. But it made me be quiet most of the time. Even coming inside new, I was like, well, let me just keep my mouth shut. I don't want these people to think that I'm, whatever, good or bad. But it's when you open your mouth that you give opportunity for there to be correction when correction is necessary, but also for there to be edification.
Right.
When what you're bringing forward is legitimately edifying. So it's like you can't, I know there's the saying, closed mouths don't get fed, but it's like closed mouths also can't do what? The closed mouth can't bring forth the word. I'll just say it plain. Closed mouth can't bring forth life, can't bring forth the word. So yeah.
Peace, everybody. Hey, peace, bro. How you doing? I'm doing good, actually. This build was actually really inspiring in a sense for me. Hearing a bunch of different angles of how people express themselves. Me and my sister, like, I've been going over one of these podcasts called The Power of Silence, right? And I think I've been going over it for a couple of days now. And being able to sit back and examine
say I was humble with some of the things that I could do, but now I kind of see it was more of a fear. When it comes to speaking, I don't like speaking. A lot of things I'm good at, even my art. After the retreat, I started putting my art out on Instagram. That type of art that I draw, I would never put out. I was used to like only show people the little cartoons or sketches I draw. I would never show them what I draw, because when I do draw, it's how I get out what I'm thinking and feeling at the same time. Whenever I draw, I never have anything in mind. Sometimes I even close my eyes. Things like even speaking, oftentimes I spend more time thinking, where I think whatever I say absolutely makes no sense, right? And like Sister Akira was just saying, sometimes I'll go to different places and meet different people, and they would tell me things about myself that I probably would not have seen, I would not have even taken in, and most of the time I don't take it in. I don't really see what they're saying. But being a part of a new has allowed me to see it in real time. Some of the changes that I've been going through, about to move, starting back up in school, even like Chief was speaking about a couple of weeks back, I didn't have a plan. I still really don't have a plan. But what I do have is an idea, and as long as I have an idea, I can make my plan, right? And I need to be true to what I have instead of trying to put things in position that I just don't have, right? And being acceptable to that, and learning that I can still grow. All of us are still growing. We're not being in a new teaches us that we don't need to be stagnant. We never should be stagnant. So understanding that maybe I'm at a position where I just have to slow downstream and I'll get to where I want to be. But right now, maybe I just only have something small, right? And it'll like a snowball. It'll grow as it goes down the hill. But that's kind of what you guys made me think of when it comes to like purpose, being in the moment, and when you're speaking about culture, learning this new culture for real, actually digging into it myself, really allows me to actually see my purpose, being able to see the moment different, being able to actually be present in the moment and not be blocked off to certain things, right? Like as Malek was just saying too, he said, you speak very well. Well, am I supposed to speak? Like, am I supposed to sound non-educated? Like, small things like that you hear often, and as you meet people that are just like you in different ways. Like, I could see different things in everybody that I really enjoy, I really like, because it kind of reminds me of things that I would like to be one day, or that I see myself as, and that allows you to continuously build a connection with each other, right? Even with the women in the group, I don't speak to them often, but some of the energy that I received from them at that retreat, and even when I speak to them now, it's always love, it's always family, it's never like hesitant. You never have to beg, and that's why I was even telling the brothers I need to ask more questions, speak up more, because like we say, closed mouth doesn't get fed. My nana always used to tell me that if I was hungry, I gotta ask. I can't just sit and expect someone to come bring me food. It's never gonna work that way. But I'd like to give thanks.
Yeah, man. A couple of the points that you were hitting on were very key in terms of how we perceive our own development.
Right.
I think Sister Yafa had said in the chat on YouTube, like really scrutinizing the counsel that we receive. Because it's very important to have counsel around us. It was very important to have people who are, like Chief says, men learn from trial and error, and from men who are further along on the path. And those men who further along the path have also learned through trial and error, so that you can try and mess up new things. it's as opposed to messing up. Where people before you've already messed up, they'll be like, no, you don't have to do that. I already did that, and you could choose a path that may be more intelligent, but maybe like a few steps further than they may have traveled down that path. There's another issue, and now you're the pioneer, like you're the one who traveled down this road a little farther than your elders, and you can bring something of more value to the community because now it's expanded. That was uncharted territory before you came along. So that's another thing. So walking and living in purpose also helps. It helps you to stay humble because you realize you don't have to try as hard too. I think Sister Yamina and I were speaking about this, the idea that you have to try to a unreasonable degree, try hard to live, or to have a very a reasonable standard of living. Some people think your life has to be like super harsh, or you have to struggle to the point where you're always working from hand to mouth, and you have to go through years and years of that before you can actually make it, as opposed to just stepping back and examining the path and doing what makes sense, as opposed to just banging your head against a brick wall in order to get to another brick wall, and thinking that's how life should be. Struggle is necessary because it's like that old Bonifa would say, like we're in the realm of struggle, we're in the realm of earth. So if we're moving through earth, then there is going to be struggle. The struggle should be for growth, not to torture yourself. Like there should be character development there. And sometimes we might mistake that for we may mistake traumatizing events for character building. So I definitely feel where you're coming from, Aki Rahim, in terms of getting that guidance from your elders and realizing that you don't necessarily have to quote unquote figure things out on your own when you're in a community, because that's something that we think as well as we're coming up in this society where it's every man for himself. Now it's every woman for herself. There's no sense of covering or community or continuation. It's just, well, I have to start from scratch like everyone else in my family. And that's how we kind of stay stuck, and it makes it more difficult to accomplish that purpose that we said we want, or even get on the path because we're not sure of the options that we have because we may have been in such a closed and caged in environment.
Yeah. As you all were talking, I think about the concept of vacillation, right? And I think, as I think of vacillation, I think of like a string or even a digital visual of equalizer, right? There's that constant reverberation that it's responding to. And so the waves always look like they're bouncing, right? So that's the visual for vacillation. And Nia, which is purpose, is actually sits between the space of that vacillating person, that vacillation between, I see eyes and hands in the chat in YouTube land, but it sits in between the idea of acceptance and speculation, right? And that's where we discover our purpose, right? It's funny. That came to mind as Yakira Eden was sharing about, you walk into a room hesitant and then you start speaking and you're like, oh, wow. I walk into a room and I want to immediately become camouflage. I actually imagine myself. And I've had elders say to me, what you doing? Because you can't hide. You may want to seamlessly, just melt into the wallpaper, and you think you're moving around and, ones people rather can't see you, but you can be seen, right? And I think that's a statement that many can probably say they've heard about themselves or so. And it's from a place of, you know, being given a purpose and having to fulfill that purpose. So even if you try to erase it, you try to, you know, deter yourself from getting there or doing it. There are many times elders or others in your community will actually hold a mirror up to you or say to you, you know, what you're doing is counterproductive, or what you're doing does not actually pay homage or honor and respect the gift you've been given. You know, or you may just go into a space and you start talking and realize those who are in front of you are actually, you know, confirming and acknowledging that your movement is, you know, it's good, it's all right. You know, you're not as off as you think you are. You're not as nervous when you're talking, and your voice isn't really shaking, right? It's not really shaking at all, because there's a confidence that's speaking. And I have to say, I'll go back to that idea of we being that human form, but there being a heavenly form. That's a perfected form. And so if what you're doing is function, as you're functioning within your purpose, if that's what you're doing, it's not going to be you anymore. You know, it will not be you anymore, walking and speaking and being, right? You're actually tapping into a part of yourself that is beyond this physical flesh, brain, you know, planet, so to speak. So there, you know, like there's a beauty, and sometimes you could feel the vacillation. You experience it. You know, I think I want to go back to something Yamina said earlier. She said, you know, like it's being in that moment, you know, and being in the moment is so crucial because you can even, you're even you're cognizant of the fact that you're vacillating, right? And that's a higher level of intellect in a sense, because you're aware of your thinking, right? That's like you're sitting above and you're aware of your thinking, and you're aware of your thinking that's in response to even emotions, right? Or feelings that's flooding through you at the moment. And then you're able to move forward courageously and not shrink into the background, or continue to be unsure or unaware. So in between that speculation and uncertainty and that acceptance of this is what I am called to do, that's where you find purpose. And it becomes so easy. You know, we just make things up in our head, right? And when we make things up in our head, remember we go back to how the brain functions. If you're in dream state, or if you experience something in dream state, or you experience something in reality, the brain really does not know the difference, right? The brain doesn't, and that's because the brain is so intertwined and integrated with the nervous system and emotions and all the other experiences that occur when we experience something, right? So, you know, I just had to pause and share that, because there's a, you know, sometimes we think it's one way or the other, but there is a vacillation, there is that moving that happens in between. Eventually, I think that we have to, you know, like vacillating, but in between has to diminish, right? Because you can't be uncertain of your purpose forever. You know, and the reason we're uncertain of our purpose in many cases is because we've drifted so far away from that innocence. We've drifted so far away from functioning in the moment, and also in other cases we've drifted so far away from community that we don't even know ourselves anymore. You know, we don't even know how we should be functioning anymore. And that will cause you to live an unexamined life. It will cause you to live a life where you do not fulfill purpose, you know. And so how can you be of value to anyone? You know, how can you, except for someone else who's kind of like on the outside looking in, or on the outside and engaging with you and kind of saying, yeah, this is not where I want to be, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what you were saying about the vacillation. I even like being like getting to the point where you're out of touch with what your purpose is. And I'm not sure we touched on this aspect of it, but there is a phenomenon too where you may know what your purpose is, but you may have been I know we talk about reformation a lot, right? And Chief had broken it down. Like we recognize that due to our living in Western society and Western culture, we may have been malformed, and we recognize the need to reform into our original state. But as we're doing so, or maybe even before we start that journey, we may have wired ourselves to respond to praise. Like that's another aspect. I didn't stop on it, but I scrolled past. I was looking for another segment this strong, and I scrolled past. I don't know why my eyes stopped on it, but I scrolled past the title "Praise as a War Tactic," right? And sometimes you working for praise can be like the reward that you seek, as opposed to praise being like a side effect of you being on your journey. Like someone may see what you're doing and they're like, oh, okay, I see you doing that. That's nice. That's good that you're doing that. It's nice, you know. It is nice to receive the recognition, but sometimes people make the recognition their purpose, you know, or they confuse the recognition for their purpose. So now they only do things that they think they'll be recognized for them, as opposed to doing things because this is what needs to be done. And I think it's important to touch on that as well, because that can become another hindrance for us.
Right.
Because we'll realize that as we go on to different levels, like you don't get praised for the same things you used to do. You know, like after you get potty trained, like that's a wrap. Nobody praises you for going to the bathroom anymore. You know, but as odd as it may seem, some of us have moved through it, or some of us might still be stuck in certain cycles of, I'm not gonna go to the bathroom unless someone's there to praise me. You know, like it's a crude example, but it does fit to certain things that we know need to be done, but we won't do it unless we know that someone's there to pat us on the back or say good job. Or we may even do things that take us away from our purpose because that's where the praise is. You know, and I think that's another aspect of what you were speaking to, Cote Maria, when you were talking about being out of touch, you know, with what your purpose is or what you should be doing, you know.
Yes, on the YouTube side, I'm just going to share really quickly. I'm going to roll back up. Sister Yafe said a long time ago, y'all. This is why some cultures don't give names right away, or names can also be defining and therefore boundaries. And this was directly connected to Yakira Eden's statement about her youth engaging with the brothers, and then I followed up with the fact that many cultures actually they focus on at birth they focus on particular divination and paying attention to, and again, divination does not mean, there are many ways to define and decipher things about our youth and how they function and can function and what their gifts are. And they focus a lot on that because they're able to, pull that vast body of knowledge and share it with the child. So they're not functioning from a space of where they're beginning without that foundational knowledge of what their purpose is and, what their gifts and strengths and talents are. There were a couple other statements, but the last one was Yakira Eden. She says, speak on it, Akoti Maria. Many have drifted so far from ya. This is, ultimately, this is the point too, because if your praise is based, if you're functioning or we're functioning based off of the praise of man, then you're like, very much like one of those angels or angels from the story of Noah that we broke down last strong, where you're so tied to the idea of Adam, the man, the six, the earth, earthly desires, that you spiral down and you become encaged and encrusted and crystallized. And that separates you from, it separates you from being, totally connected and attuned. So, in many ways we have drifted, and that drift puts that space between us where we're not relying on or communing with Yah. We're not relying on any of that connection with Yah as how we move when it comes to praise or being encouraged or being inspired. We're really leaning on, a token from the society that we live in, or as you said, Master Mani, like the word song of another that may seem as if it's encouragement, and sometimes that encouragement, that those compliments and those praise that we receive are they're detrimental too, in that they can put a target on your back, and sometimes that's done on purpose. So you think, oh, they just, like this is wonderful. No, it's not, because it's meant to put a target on your back. Because this, and I say that because this culture is fed by competition. It's fed by mine is better than yours. It's, it's fed by, it's very sick, and it's wrong. I mean, for some people it works, but it doesn't necessarily work for all. And for others, it drives them into insanity, or it drives them toward hate of others, which is sad, because anyone else around you is a projection of yourself. Reality. Reality. I just, there's some of what you were sharing too, Master Menelik, made me think of, as an educator, my brain instantly, goes into, and this is some of the older points that you mentioned. I think this was long ago in the conversation on the build, because there was just so much building happening. I kind of lost sight of some of those points, but you mentioned the you speak so well, and my question would always be in my head, because I don't think I've ever said that, but it's like, well, who set the standard for what it means to speak well? Because what is that? What if I speak Russian and there's or Hebrew, and you don't speak Hebrew, then you don't know the subtle nuances of that language or the accent. So how do you even know if all you speak is English, which is a bastard language? So who are you to even speak about, you're comparing it to the one thing and there's so many other languages and ways to sound and to speak. That's one way. And speaking words is only one form of communication. One form of communication. What about those who are masterful musicians, who speak through playing on instruments, right? Or blowing through an instrument? How do you is there a way to compare that type of communication? So there's just so much, and that statement is linked to purpose, because again, sometimes we may think that the gift we have or the way we communicate adequately is not sufficient. And I understand there's a level of education and articulation that's required, and communication that is required, necessary and important as and anyone, in order to engage with community and build and nation build. That's needed. That's needed. So this is not me saying, don't speak English. That's not what I'm saying. But I am asking the question, who are you as a person to say, oh, you speak properly, but what are you comparing it to? And what about the other languages of communication? You also spoke, Master Menelik, on classical music, and ones that people identify classical music as, for a particular race of people or particular
That's
group.
white people music.
Right, people music, right. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say the white people. I tried not to say the white people music, but white people music. My father introduced me to classical music. He listened to Beethoven. He listened to. I knew them all. I loved them. I really enjoyed, and I still do to today. And I introduced that to the students that I once worked with in Bedford-Stuyvesant with the same response. But what we don't know is that there's so many things that we shut off or shut out that actually feeds the expansion of our brain. You're probably saying, well, why are you going back, Sister Maria? You're already, but this is directly connected to the brain and the neurons, but also expanding the other, what was labeled as the passive 90% of the brain. Engaging in long periods of listening to classical music can actually empower and expand the part of the brain that works with numbers and mathematics, right? So that's how you hear people say, oh, it's for certain people. Well, why are you saying it's for certain people? Why are you saying that? Are you saying that because you know that when that particular type of music is used and played, it is done to edify and to expand a certain brain or the brain of a particular race of people, and you want to keep the others dumbed down? Is that what's happening? Possibly. So there's so many things to think of, to introduce and to reintroduce in the conversation, because maybe we're walking away from this experience, this conversation today, thinking, okay, how can I? And we've gotten a lot of ways that we can realign ourselves to our purpose, make sure that we're walking in purpose and we're purpose driven. I remember when I saw that word purpose driven for the very first time, I fell in love with it. I think it was Sister Yafe gave me a badge, and I wore that badge for the rest of the school year every day. I swear, when I was an educator, I wore it every day because there was just something about purpose driven. And at that time, I actually was reading the 14 Keys, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what? It was mind blowing. So yeah, listening to classical music can also help with that part of the enhancing our brain function. And the last piece that I'm going to say, just to share on how we can enhance brain function, just giving simple things, is the crossing of our hands and the crossing of our legs. And maybe Sister Yamina can jump in, because she shared an exercise with me a couple of days ago, or strums ago rather, and shared some accomplishments with that. And I said to myself, oh wow, this is exactly what that is doing. It is igniting two parts of the brain to be integrated at the same time. That helps to expand our brain function and increase our memory. And most I knows I need some of those exercises. So the crossing of the feet or the legs at the ankle and even at the knees, what you're doing is you're actually forcing the brain to engage, the right side of the brain to engage with the left leg, right? So right now my left leg is crossed over my, can you all hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Just unmute, because. Okay. So everybody's so quiet. I'm like, what's going on? Okay. Yeah. So right now my left leg is actually crossed over my my right, and if I take it away, and so now I'm just standing on my two legs. My left is on my left and my right is on my right. My left brain is focused on the right side of my body, and the right side of my brain is focused on the left side of my body, right? But as soon as we move the left hand and the left foot into the sphere, the physical space of the right side of the body, the brain begins to acknowledge and integrate both left and right together, and that aids in expanding the glial parts of our of our brain, and it helps to expand thinking and brain functioning as well too. I think I also find it interesting that sometimes maybe we come home and when we rest, we tend to cross our legs. Like when you sit down, I think, the people have an ottoman and things like that. You always tend to cross your legs. It's a calming practice. And so even when we're going into spaces where we may feel a little bit of anxiety or nervousness because you're excited, and you want to make sure you approach from a calm space, you can engage in crossing your arms or crossing your legs, and it will put you in a space where you're functioning better and you're in a balanced space. So those are some of the tips I wanted to share as we embrace being hardwired for purpose, this strong, so that we walk into this strong, lighting fires and burning out old and false ideas about the 10% and really embracing our potential, which lies far beyond the physical brain.
Thank you for that synopsis and those tips and tools. I wanted to just clarify one thing or touch on a bit more. One thing that you shared when you were speaking about competition. I understood the perspective that you were taking, right? So in a Western construct where it's me, mine, and I'm cordoned off from the rest of the world, and all I need is myself. It fosters a competitiveness that is, as you put it, sick, and potentially very detrimental to the self and others. But there is another side, and I didn't want the audience to walk away with not understanding the fullness of what I think you were delivering in that moment. The other side of competition is the healthy piece, and that's the opportunity, giving or creating opportunities for there to be one winner, and how that connects to purpose, right? Because kickball, she's not going to be winning. She being me, but that doesn't mean that I don't participate, and that doesn't mean that if I'm on a team that I don't have a purpose and I can't serve to assist in whatever winning may look like. But in that, perhaps one of the youth or one of the others engaging in that competition, that is their opportunity to show fully what their gifts and talents are or skills are. And so in that environment, so when you're creating opportunities for competition in community or with an intended purpose of unification, it isn't that sick, toxic environment that you touched on. So in all things, we just need to remember that there is a light and a dark side to it. So just examine when you're experiencing certain things, where it's coming from. And I think an example that Chiva's touched on, and it's funny because when I think about it, many comedians, and it's usually the very masculine comedians, have touched on, participation awards and how it's done away with lots of boys being interested in organized sports, like in school, if you will, because it's like, well, why bother? Like, there's no winner, there's no loser. Everybody gets something. So it almost no longer it evens the playing field in such an unhealthy way that it doesn't cultivate that thing that even Master Menelik touched on, like. My youth wasn't interested in, I'm going to lose because, I'm going to be playing, learning or playing against these much older men. It was, this is what we're doing? Okay, I'm going to try my best and I'm going to put my, see what happens. So I just wanted to offer that counterbalance to what you were sharing. Yeah,
of course. I mean, that it's critical to understand that that competition, that even when you're saying like he wasn't too worried about being in competition with the older brothers, because what values competition at that moment was working in communion with his team. So yes, there is opportunity for competitiveness, but as you're talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, can you imagine how, you know, the value? I right now I'm not engaged in any kind of activities that are, you know, that focus on team and not necessarily team building, but competitive team activities, right? Sports or anything like that. So there isn't, and you know, like I'm not speaking from that space now, but there's something that drives you when you're in competition. When you're in competition and it's not individual, but there's this communal effort that has to be that is created, and it's literally based on what you're saying. Like, this is my time to shine. This is where, you know, like I have paramount skills, and you know, these are the talents that have been given to me. I may not be able to do this, but this is where I'm able to shine. And I agree with you that those opportunities are definitely, and you know, I'm speaking from a space as an educator too, that you know, we have to create those spaces and opportunities for our youth to grow in balance, you know. So thank you for sharing that.
On that note too, there wasn't just the team sports. There was like the chess. Like there were individual opportunities for individual achievement within the group. You know, he was able to sharpen his intellect against other brothers. It wasn't just me playing at chess. There was brother Nehemiah. There was also brother Zach. You know, there's also brother Isaiah. Like, we were all playing chess. So he's like, this we doing? This we doing? But I thought it was real cool that when we weren't doing it, he was like, yeah, when we playing chess again. You know, so he had another thing to explore and another aspect of himself to sharpen as well. So these participation trophies as well, they sort of like dull the opportunity for even self-development. I don't want to try as hard if I don't get to be like one of the winners. You know, if I'm only playing to participate, then I don't want to play. I want to win. You know, so if you're giving everybody trophies, like no matter who wins, no matter how hard people work, that it sort of dampens my willingness to actually put in the work. And I think my older brother and I were talking about this yesterday. It was either last night or earlier this morning. Like, if no matter how hard I work, if someone in a similar position as me gets the same amount of pay, no matter how little they work, then why would I want to work hard? Right. You know, if that's all I get, is the hard work just so I can maybe possibly one day get 50 cents more, or maybe possibly get a raise? Or am I working hard because there's something to be worked towards, or there's something to achieve? You know, which is why these places can be detrimental when you're working at 9 to 5, because the reward isn't proportional to the effort. Right. True. You know, and I think we can sort of lose sight of what it is that we're capable of, because we don't have that balance in our lives to where no matter how hard I try, because I've contracted myself to this certain experience, I'll always get the same reward, you know, or less, as opposed to the balancing thought. You know, if I work hard, if I don't work hard, maybe if I don't show up on time, I'll get cut, or if I miss a date, I'll get cut. Right. So I'm capped off at this thing, and if it starts to drain me to the point where I may have to miss a few days, then that shows proportionately. But my level of work and effort and sacrifice doesn't really, it's not really reflected as well. You know, so that's something to consider too. I know I went a lap, I just wanted to say that there was individual effort put in as well as group and team effort. But yeah, that's important in terms of being able to grow as an individual. You can put in a level of effort and see the results of it, as opposed to just fueling someone else's machine and just being a battery to it.
Right. And that ties directly to purpose and it being not being reduced to just your job, right? Or do you know, like so it's not inconsequential. It's not just his thing, you know. But it's way more than the job or what it is that you may do for pay in this cycle of your life or this part of your life, so that way it can help to fuel something greater or something bigger. And I think that's one of the last things that I wanted to share before we wrap up, is just understanding that, making that distinction between job, career, and not letting our purpose morph into that, or just, taking purpose and stuffing it into the costume of the job or the career that we identify with, or that we do. We may not identify with it, but that we do. Because purpose goes beyond that, right? Purpose is much larger than that one little thing that we may think we do very well, and we get paid for it, And even in that instance, that payment is a reward, right? It's a reward. It's a form of recognition. It's a token. This goes back to some of your points earlier, Master Menelik. So I wanted to share that. And before we leave, unless there is anything more anyone else wants to share or add to the conversation, go ahead.
Oh, that's the second hand. She hinted twice, and it's time to go.
No.
Oh, no. You missed the first one, Master Menelik, when she gave the summary. That was it's like, okay, inconsequential.
Oh, okay. I know she said. Yeah, I know she said before we close out, and then she said, before we leave, again, someone else wants to say something.
What you can't say is 206, right?
I can't say it's 206. No, I cannot. I also don't want to just sit here and not have anyone else share. But if you all want to share and build some more, we can. Please, I see we have Brother Mayuba in the space, Margie, Iris, Naya, Ra. You're not on stage, but I wanted to just greet everyone and also give thanks to Raheem, Darian, Sister Yafe, Ima Yakira Eden, Brother Master Menelik, and Sister Yamina for, joining and, sharing not just your ideas, not just your opinions, but really digging into your culture and sharing that and putting that on the table. Sometimes it is difficult to be on the calls or be on in the conversation and be able to juggle multiple things or be most present and still be able to contribute and build. So I appreciate the contribution and the building. It was really great. And I wanted to leave us all with an affirmation. Y'all laugh me to scorn about this, wrapping up. But I wanted to leave us with a mantra that comes directly from the 14 Keys. A righteous purpose is a call within a community that anchors a person to their character. So as you embark on your journey this strong, and enjoy the rest of your Yom Rishon, your Sunday, I want you to hold on to that mantra, remembering, directly connected to one of the questions I was asked earlier. Like, we can't function off of purpose without culture, without community. Can't happen, won't happen. A righteous purpose is a call within a community that anchors a person to their character. Peace and power to everyone.
Give thanks.
Give thanks.
peace, everyone. I know we're closing out, and I wanted to actually quickly type the affirmation in there, but I'll leave it in the description for this video. So if you're looking for the mantra, it will be placed in the description for the video. Peace.